Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews, the podcast where we take a look back at films from our past that we either have fond memories of and expect to hold up, bad memories of for fun sometimes, or movies that we suspect won't hold up at all, and we watch them again and decide if we still recommend them or not. Some previous films we've done, we've looked at such family classics as RoboCop and Battle Royale, and more adult films like Toy Story. Toy Story hits me in the feels. At some point we're gonna get to Toy Story 3. That's gonna be an experience. Anyway,
that's gonna be brutal. That's gonna be tough.
That is gonna be tough. Today we are taking a look at my first pretentious film. So, from the era that Chris and I grew up in, there are a handful of films that once you got old enough to sort of move past sort of blockbuster cinema and started finding more indie films, and we were in a weird generation where like the rise of like DVD, and then the also the sort of weird budget DVD thing, the idea of like you'd go to like HMV or like a similar store in the UK, and there were all these like films that like had not been big blockbusters, so they were selling the DVDs for like pounds, like so cheap. So everyone started like buying and recommending like these like lesser known films to young people who had only been watching like the blockbusters, and suddenly movies like Donnie Darko, which got a huge cult following in the UK from its DVD release only. I'm trying to think what else. There's tons of them. Eternal Sunshine. I felt like that got passed around like that as a DVD. And one of the other big ones was Memento, which is what we're sitting down to watch today. Chris chose this one. I'm curious, Chris. Like I think you chose this for that reason, right? You were remembering it as like when you first sit down to watch a movie. Oh, yeah. The other one I always think of is the Charlie Kaufman one. What's the Being John Malkovich? That's another one that got passed around a lot. Like is like one of those like sort of slightly pretentious, like it's your first foray into like cinema, you know.
Shawshank Redemption was a bit like that as well, wasn't it? Like everyone had that 4 DVD box set. Like
yeah,
it's like you gotta watch Shawshank, man. And
yeah,
like Saving Private Ryan and stuff. Not necessarily the kind of pretentious tone, but that sense of like this is a film,
right? Yeah. So everyone was kind of like, now I'm into film, you know, proper film. And I'm not saying everyone went through this phase in the UK, but definitely the circles I hung out with did, and there was a lot of discussion of like this sort of film, and it was like a weird transition period from like just watching like all the obvious like family films and blockbusters and whatever you could scramble your hands on, like it was sort of more widely done, but instead actually starting to dig out like award-winning films or like cult classics and things like that. And Memento is one of those ones that came to me through that means. I remember I bought it for like £3 from a DVD store that was like 2 doors down from the HMV, but was always cheaper. I can't remember what it was called now. It's called like Music Zone or something like that. It was fucking terrible. But I got a lot of cheap CDs and DVDs from there. And after a few people had recommended it, I bought a copy, which I still own to this day and cracked out this week, to watch it on. It's and I just remember being blown away by it. And it's so easy with a film like this to go like, well, I was young and I hadn't seen a lot of cinema. Because I think it's a really interesting example, because I think going back to something like Being John Malkovich that seemed clever at the time, you might go, actually, this isn't as sort of smart as my teenage brain thought it was. I just hadn't watched a lot of films back then. Or maybe that's not the best example. Maybe Eternal Sunshine. I'm not sure yet. Well, there's a few of these we need to go back to at some point. Or Donnie Darko is another good example that might happen. Whereas I think this one, I think it was passed around as being quite smart, because actually I think it is. I don't think that was my teenage brain misunderstanding. I think I genuinely, I still believe this is kind of a genius film for a lot of reasons. Despite my concerns, as when you said it last week, I remember thinking, God, maybe this is a really pretentious film, and I'm going to sit down and watch it and think it's a lot of shite as an adult. And go,
no, and in terms of where the choice came from, it actually, because it was down to 2 in my mind. I'll just say what the other one was. The other one was Good Will Hunting.
Yes.
Which,
Another great choice for that category as well. Yeah.
yeah, and because that more so than Memento, which I watched at uni,
Yeah.
more so for me. Like, I specifically had heard a lot of thing about good stuff about Good Will Hunting, and I was a teenager still at like secondary school, and I went out and brought the DVD and very much this film's very renowned, and watched it in that way and was very arty-farty about it. So it was kind of but I mainly, we'd done a lot of, to varying degrees of success, light-hearted, more sort of comedic leaning movies, and I just wanted something different, and that kind of category was one we hadn't really done before. And so when I narrowed it down to those two, I think I just went with Memento because it was kind of the more... Sometimes you go with the story, and sometimes you just go with the film that you fancy watching. And I was like, I've not seen Momentum in years, if not maybe I've only seen it the once. And it was like, I wanted to introduce it to Jess, so yeah. Because for me, I watched it at university. Like, a friend of ours, Sophie, was like, you got to watch Memento, man. And I was like, okay, and watched it and knew nothing about it, so got that joy, which I gave Jess as well, very much so. Like, I didn't show her a trailer, I didn't explain that, shit went backwards. I just played it, and I think that if you can, and so anyone that's not seen it, pause, watch it. I think we definitely, if not obvious already, recommend it.
Yes.
And
so yeah,
it's such a joy.
If you're interested,
and I can't.
Yeah, I'd say if you're interested at all, like, we're recommending it. Pause this, go check it out, and then come back and listen to this rather than letting us ruin it for you.
I think as big a movie as it is, and I always think it's partly a huge movie because obviously it gets listed when people talk about Nolan. But I think actually it's not so big that, like if you compare it to, say, Good Will Hunting or Donnie Darko, so much of those films, from It's Not Your Fault to the Bunny Rabbit and stuff, and like Mad World, the soundtrack to Donnie Darko, so much is in the zeitgeist about those films,
right?
That probably someone who hasn't seen them still has an idea, knows what to expect, and knows the beats, because, or at least some scenes. Whereas this, I think, is still is whilst it is often talked about because of the Nolan of it all, and those that love it and stuff, etc.
The content of the film seems to have been forgotten.
Yeah, you could still... I think there are other people like Jess that you could show this film to that know nothing, and that is the best way to view it. So yeah, but before, if people want it, before the spoilers, I think it's fairly clear. I agree with you completely. It absolutely is still so clever for reasons we'll talk about when spoiling, and I think absolutely people should watch it. It so holds up.
Yeah, and I think, the irony being, of course, that, like, because it's been a while since I've seen it, I'd forgotten big chunks of the film, and that is in itself.
Yeah, same.
So this wasn't a first viewing, which I think actually made it more effective, because I remembered bits but not all of it, and that kind of helped put me in the frame of mind of the lead character. We'll get to why, in a moment, but and I think you're right as well in terms of, like, its success. Like, I think it made 40 million worldwide, which, that's not a small amount of money for a movie that cost 10 million to make. But again, it's definitely, I think there are people who just, they know it exists, but they don't know that it's they just think it's like a standard, like, sort of 2000s, like, maybe action but like thriller thing. Without, the problem is, to really sell someone on this movie, you have to explain the premise, and ideally you don't want the premise explaining to you, which I think is part of it. So yeah, I 100% agree. It totally holds up. Definitely go check it out and then come back to listen to this if you are interested at all. Availability is limited at present. You can get it on Amazon for a couple of quid. I cracked out my old DVD because I have that.
When you say Amazon, though, it's literally you have to buy it on DVD. It's not actually available on demand.
Is it not? I thought it was on demand for like a couple of quid. Oh wow!
No, because I checked that earlier in the week, because I was like, Well, if I can't get hold of the DVD, like it's presumably available. And
Right.
currently it came up as unavailable in the Prime app.
Oh wow. Well, there you go. So yeah, it's obviously not like that easy to come by at the moment. So which is a shame, really, because I think it should be more available than it is. So let's break down the premise now, because I feel like we're going to talk in circles if we can't talk more freely. So definitely recommend go check it out. Spoilers ahoy. So, for those who don't remember or only vaguely remember, or who have chosen not to watch it but are just going to listen to this review, to give you some context, the movie tells the story of a person with, is it anterograde amnesia, or instead of retrograde? Is that the right phrase? I'll find it later. It's somewhere in my trivia. Basically, it's a kind of amnesia where you can't make new memories. So you have all of the memories up to the point in which you acquired it. They're still in there, but you can't make any more. So that means that every few minutes, if you're not concentrating, the timescale shifts based on your level of concentration. So you can actually maintain your memories for like 10, 15 minutes if you're really paying attention to everything that's happening around you, or if something very serious is happening. But as soon as you're in a more casual moment, driving the car somewhere or whatever, and you allow your mind to move on from that, it's not there anymore. It's gone. And as a result, this character is constantly finding himself in places and not understanding where they are. And you think, well, okay, that's kind of interesting, I guess, but I don't know how that translates it so powerfully into a film. The genius choice to pair that with the story being told backwards. Now, stop me if you've heard this one before, but Christopher Nolan clearly has a time fetish. I don't know why. I can't explain it. It's a lot less weird than Quentin Tarantino's foot fetish, so he gets a pass. He does weird time stuff in all of his movies. Interstellar has that big timey-wimey ending where the guy goes back through his own life. Then Inception obviously has the dreams within dreams where time works differently. Even the one movie I thought he couldn't possibly put a time-based thing in, which was Dunkirk, he managed to give it a time element because the stories are being told at different rates, which is insane. And works really well, actually. It's a very good film. But and then obviously I've not even mentioned bloody Tenet, which is all about time going backwards. So the guy's got a thing.
I don't think there's one in The Prestige, is there?
No, I think that's like the one example I could think of that didn't. But obviously the Batman films, for obvious reasons.
I do enjoy that. We were so careful on like getting people to stop and probably more than any other episode made a clear spoilers line in the sand.
I just realised
and then you just casually ruined Interstellar.
Sorry. You should see Interstellar. It's pretty good. It's not his best, but it's all right. But but my point stands. There's time elements in all these movies, and even before that ending of Interstellar, actually, he's playing with time, isn't he? Because the time moves differently on certain planets. Earlier in the film, so there's tons of stuff with time. He loves time, but this is his first sort of time excuse playing with that, basically, and you can see why he's so interested in it. But this is probably the best example of it because it's the most powerful way of playing into the concept because you're watching the film in reverse. When a scene starts, you also don't know how the character got to where he is. You're in his position. You're also missing the information of what just happened. So there's a moment, and this is for those who don't remember, I don't know, there's a moment where and it's just a good example of this, where he's running, and there's another guy running, and he goes, I'm chasing this guy, and he tries to follow him, then the guy comes at him with a gun, and he goes, actually, no, I'm being chased. And you go through the exact experience of the character because you're missing the scene before it, because the whole movie plays scene by scene in reverse order. So you don't know how he ended up being chased by this guy. So when the scene starts and he's going, I'm chasing someone, you're like, okay, he's chasing someone. And then it switches and you go, oh no, he's being chased. You are in his shoes. And that's a small version of what the entire movie is. His confusion is your confusion. He's asking questions that you're asking. And As a result, the movie is just so full of very clever dramatic tension based on very simple things. It's not a complex movie. You put it forward, which we'll come to, because I did that too. The movie's actually really straightforward. It's a story of a man whose wife was murdered, and in the incident where she was murdered, he got injured in the same incident, and so the person took away his memory and raped and murdered his wife. So he's on a revenge kick, and he's keeping track of his investigation into who this guy is and tracking this guy down by like taking pictures and writing notes on himself, or tattooing notes on himself, and it's a mystery unraveling in front of you that's just full of tension and detail and all this stuff. Forward, it plays very differently, and again, we'll come to that. But the genius of the film is that premise, because it's so simple, to the point where every time I watch this movie, and I remember thinking this the first time I saw it too, I'm just like, how did nobody do this before this?
Yeah.
How was this the first time someone had that idea? Because it's so clever and so simple that it's kind of genius. So that's the foundation of what the movie is. I'm very curious, Chris. One, like, sort of how you felt watching it second time with a more critical eye. Was there anything you picked up on that you didn't quite like as much, or what did work especially well for you? But also, I'm very curious about Jess's reaction to the film. Having not seen it before or known about it.
No, she loved it. It took, I think, 2-3 like color scenes for her to go, oh right, it's backwards, like, and not just like a flashback that then reverses sort of thing. Like, it's fully backwards. I think what's so genius about it is they plant so many little things that you then watch unfold. Why has is it Natalia or Natalie? Natalie. Why has Natalie's
it's Natalie because there's the one less subtle moment of the idea of the movie. Her name literally has the word lie in it.
Yeah, nice.
Natalie.
Why is her Polaroid got a cross through some writing?
Right.
Why is the window shield smashed? Where does the scar on his face come from?
Right.
There's so many things, and as such, I think the movie, for like a just under 2 hours movie, the pacing really chugs along because you know exactly where each scene is heading. Because the end of the scene is the beginning of the scene before.
Yes.
So you know where each scene is heading, which makes it feel pacier. They slowly chip away at all of those things. So like every, scene or so, something's getting that you have a moment of, that's why that is. Okay, cool. So I think and also I didn't quite, because I couldn't remember exactly what I knew that the guy he killed wasn't the guy, and right. I knew that it built to that revelation, and I knew that there was something to do with him, and he was involved, more directly in his wife's death, but I couldn't remember the full details.
Right.
And I just think it's amazing how it's kind of got these little mysteries, but also these bigger mysteries that towards the end, you're thinking, how the fuck does this tie together? Like Jess said those words. She was just like, I'm trying to work it out, but there's just so many different things. But they come together in like one scene where basically the guy explains it all. And that in itself, in other things, is sometimes completely unrewarding. Recent seasons of Doctor Who did scenes where like a character just literally stands and explains it. But in this, it's so rewarding because I don't think, and obviously it's been decades since either of us watched it for the first time.
Right.
But I don't think it's that guessable. Like I really don't. I think the twists still play. And I think that's part of its genius. And actually, you could get wanky about it if you wanted to. And I expect, I'm fascinated to hear about watching it in order because I imagine it plays quite
quite differently.
Yeah, and it almost, I imagine that in the correct order, the script kind of falls apart a little bit because it's not a chronological thing chopped up and switched the wrong way round. It's written to be this way. So there will be scenes where stuff will be more overt than more overt in the right order than it will seem in the reverse. But equally, for every one of those, I imagine there's the opposite. You know, it's really the way he goes, we'll take your car. You know why. You notice that, and you notice it's weird that he doesn't want to take his own car, but the movie's going at a really decent pace that it doesn't give you time to stop and think, right, car, what else is involving cars? License plates. Maybe it's his license plate. Do you know what I mean? Because it's too busy making you go, oh, that's how the window smashed. Cool. You know? So, yeah, it's she really loved it for those reasons, and yeah, I did too.
Yeah, I think if just for the audience, for the listeners, I should say, is like benefit to clarify the general trajectory of the ending, because the ending is the beginning, but also the ending is also the setting himself off on that journey, just to explain the sort of circular nature of the film as well. The movie ends with him murdering the man he believes to have been the one who killed his wife. Sorry, the movie starts. It's a very weird way to phrase it, with him killing that man, and then it sort of goes back through how he got there. And what you discover at the end of the movie is essentially him choosing to murder a person that's been dicking him around for years. And putting himself on that path. And the irony of that being that so much of the movie is about him saying there's a difference between facts and opinions and stuff, and like this idea of like, memory is unreliable. My facts are concrete. They're things I know. Yet, in the end, the entire premise of everything he goes through that we see in the film is based on him lying to himself and manipulating a fact in the order we see it at the end of the movie, but in chronological order at the start of this sequence of events. So the movie ends with him setting himself on the path to kill the person. But it's not the person who did the deed that led him here in the first place. That person's probably long dead. But it's what I do think is kind of genius about the movie is that ending is so smart, because ending on the beginning of that journey, but with a new context in mind of how we got there. If you're sitting to write a movie in reverse, you go, well, how do you have any dramatic tension on the start of the journey? Well, you make the start of the journey a false start. So you realise that entire journey was misguided in some way. And it speaks a lot to the themes of the movie, but it ties into everything else. It says a lot about his own thoughts on stuff, but it also like contradicts them. Like it's all very, very clever. Watching it the other way round is an interesting experience. So I agree with everything you said about the way it works, played out correctly, which is backwards. Watching it forwards was interesting. So I knew it would happen this way, but portions of the movie play out a little less interesting that way round, because you get all the information and then it all just feels very inevitable and just happens. But with that said, I was expecting things to not fit, things to not make sense when played forward. But I'll tell you what, they did a fucking good job, because it all works. It still functions, and it helps you spot little details that you might have only taken in subconsciously the first time. I'll give you the one that kind of made me just go, huh? And I was like, oh yeah. There's a moment when he is in the bar with Natalie, and it's one of the first times he's meeting her. It's the first time he's meeting her, actually, we later find out, but we don't know that at that point, because obviously you're watching it in reverse. And he says, I'm supposed to meet you here. I've got a note that says that. Found it in my pocket. And she just goes, your pocket. And it's dead casual. It just comes and goes as a line. And in the moment, it washed over me to the point where I didn't pay any attention to it. I didn't even consciously go, oh, there's a clue. But at the end of the movie, you see him kill someone and take that person's clothes. When you watch it forwards, you realise that was never his note to come see her.
Yeah.
it was a note he got from the guy he killed. But when and that you get when you watch it, because they make a big point of him taking the clothes. But the bit that I thought was interesting that I picked up on the second time round was her reaction of your pocket. With new context, she knows he's wearing the other guy's clothes because she knows that guy and therefore knows his suit. So she's observing that's not his pocket. But again, it goes by so subtly. Watching it forwards is a really good experiment. Does it work as a movie? Would you sit down and watch it that way? No, for two reasons. One, again, all the dramatic tension that the movie builds is gone because you know where it's all going, because you get all the answers and then see it play out. And two, the way they've done it on the DVD. So, if you're in the US, you need the 2-disc edition of the DVD to get access to it. You need to solve a bunch of riddles in the menus and you can unlock it. In the European version, they were a lot lazier. You've just got to wait till a certain point in the menu screen and hit A and it'll play. It's quite funny how much easier it is to get access to. I didn't realise it was on the European version of the DVD initially until much later in the process. I thought I didn't have access to that version. But it's the way they've done it is they've just reordered the scenes. Now, in the true version of the movie, the original version of the movie you would see if you sat down and put Memento on today, the way they help you understand the flow of time so you don't get lost is that they make sure every scene ends with the opening of the previous scene so you can link it together. So the scene will start with him pulling up at a tattoo parlor, and the next scene will end with him arriving at the tattoo parlor. So that your brain can link the two and follow the train of events, yeah? The sequence of events. When you just swap the scenes around, it means every 3 or 4 minutes, less maybe, depending on how short the scene is, you see a scene twice. Because they didn't bother to edit out the duplicate. They just swapped them around.
Which is why, and I'm going to finish that sentence, Dan, bear with me a second, despite it saying that I had 70%, my headphones are now saying I've got 5% and they're beeping at me. So let me just switch headphones to another pair. I'll be back in 1 second.
Do it. While he's doing that, I'll say there's a version someone's done on YouTube of the forward cut, and it's done correctly. Where the scenes actually link properly and you don't get... Because it just takes you out of the movie when you're just constantly being reminded that it was originally fun. It would just be so much smoother if they just linked them together properly. It's a shame that they don't. Because I think it would have played better that way. I understand how it's easier to pick up chunks of the movie and just swap them round. But yeah. Doesn't quite work as well. So for those two reasons, I only recommend the forward version if you're interested in the structure and whether it actually does all make sense and fit together when viewed from that angle. If that makes sense.
I like the... I did my which is why in I'll finish this point when I reconnect my headphones, but I like that you were like, no, Chris, if your headphones are broken... I'm making a point. Did you say about the YouTube video? Because it sounded like you were about to, and then my headphones.
Oh yeah, I did mention it. Sorry, I didn't realize that's what. I thought that you'd interrupted to tell me about the headphones. I didn't realize you had a point to add on that, so I just carried on.
No, that's why I was like, which is why? Because
I thought you'd be like, which is why I'm gonna have to interrupt you because I've got to switch my headphones. I was like, oh no.
No. I was like, which is why, and I'll finish that point in a second. And then as I turned my headphones off, I heard you saying about the YouTube video, which is what I was about to say, and I'm pretty sure under my breath, which listeners will be able to hear, I just go, I was going to make that point.
Well, credit where credit's due. Chris is the one who found that. So, a little background. I, this morning, got up with the intention of watching the backwards version, cracked out my DVD, Googled how to get to it, and saw it was only on the 2-disc version, and went, oh, I don't have it. And then dicked about, not doing anything because I thought I had several hours till the podcast, and then just enough time to squeeze the movie in, I went, oh wait a minute, maybe what version do I have? I looked at the back and I was reading the special features, and it was like, and a secret feature, and I went, what's the secret feature on this DVD? And I googled it. It turns out in Europe it's on the 1-disc version, and that's when I realized I actually did have access to it. But Chris, when I told him this, I was like, mate, it's on YouTube, and it's a shorter version.
No. You gotta no. Give me the credit. Give me the credit I'm due. Dan texts me and he's like,
"Oh yeah, that's true.
I'm running a bit behind. Do you mind if we? Have you got a hard out, or can we push it back?" I'm like, "No, we can push it back. Half one, good." And he's like, "Yeah, no, that's good. I've just got to do something, but it'll be worth it for the podcast." And immediately I was like, "Are you watching the forwards version?"
Yeah,
he was just like, bingo.
He knew. Yeah, no, that was very clever. I thought I was quite impressed. So yeah, I think Chris just casually throws me this link, and some brilliant person has put together a version on YouTube where I flicked through it. The scenes are stitched together correctly, not with the big stops. But very quickly, what I will say about the forward version is it makes you appreciate the structure of the movie more.
No, but not just in my opinion, not just the structure. Sorry, that sounded really, in my opinion, didn't mean for that to happen. For me, it's not just the structure; it's the wealth of detail. So, and it can't be underestimated. So, your example is a great one, which I hadn't noticed. The whole your pocket thing.
Yeah, because it doesn't that just blow by you. It's just such an. It's just by that point in the movie. You get so used to things that make no sense to you that you stop picking up on them, I think. At a certain point, you just start accepting confusion as a natural state. Because you just go, well, if it's important, they'll clarify later.
But also, it's the fact that it feels like every possible question, apart from the ones that are deliberately kind of ambiguous.
There is one big one we're going to talk about at the end, because I want to ask you whether you think it's one way or the other. We'll come back to that, though. That's a big point I want to talk about.
Apart from those things, which feel... Because that's a whole other compliment of the movie, the fact that in some ways the narrator is an unreliable narrator because memories become unreliable, as the movie talks about. But it's like every kind of little question you have, an answer has been thought about and is there. Like, for example, there's a scene where Natalie comes in and it's like he knows her. And Jess and I were going, but he can't remember her, but he's acting... It's when she comes back in the house. He's acting like she does. Later on, there's a bit where he talks about the fact that recognition is something people with that condition learn to fake because it's just easier than feeling different and, having to explain it. So they just sort of feign a look. And you see him do it a bunch of times. Like, in a lot of Teddy's... when Teddy phones him and is like, let's meet up, and he's just like, yeah, sure. Like, there's a whole bunch of them. And the fact that they went to the effort of explaining that, and the fact that, again, your example of the note is brilliant. Like, the thought behind so much of this stuff. And actually, of course we wouldn't recommend the forward version. I don't think the filmmakers would. It's not the film they made. It's a great thought experiment, but it's almost inaccurate to judge the forwards version because that's not the movie we have.
Yeah, so the forward version is a great experiment. Like, I would recommend the forward version to someone who really enjoys the movie and wants a different angle on the movie that might help them see details they might have missed. Don't watch the forward version like you're sitting down to watch a movie. You watch the forward version as a sort of experiment to help you analyze the movie further with a different angle. And that is the only way to look at that version, because you couldn't show someone that and it work as a film.
No, but like I say, it's not meant to, because it's
absolutely not. But I'm glad it exists though, because it really helps you appreciate the level of detail and the cleverness of the structure of the movie. I mean, I'll tell you one thing as well that blows my mind watching it now. The movie would be utterly disorientating if it weren't for an element that when I explain it now to you, the listener, if you haven't seen the movie, you will be confused that that's how they did it. So, while the story goes backwards, there are sequences in black and white that run forwards, mixed in, that are technically flashbacks. Yeah, no, they're flashbacks by any definition, actually, no matter which way you're looking at it. They always go at the beginning. Chronologically, they happened first. They're flashbacks, but they're playing chronologically, mixed in with the scenes going backwards. And you're probably
and then they meet in the middle.
Go on, sorry.
And then they meet in the middle.
And they meet in the middle, right? They meet, they meet towards the end of towards the third act, basically. So you're probably going, that sounds horrendously confusing. How is this a compliment? I will tell you exactly why. They're not sequences where he's out and about doing his investigating or whatever, which is what the rest of the movie is. They're mostly him in a room telling a story. So they don't need to be linked to each other to understand the chronology, number one. But number two, what they help the movie solve a problem which it would have had they not been there. If you play this movie with them removed, it would be so obscenely jarring to see him enter a room and then cut back to a car and then watch him enter a room and then cut back to a... They break up the scenes so the cuts to similar locations between the scenes moving backwards don't essentially give you a headache. Because they absolutely fucking would.
But that's what's so amazing, and we should almost find the... Hold on. That's what's so amazing about that YouTube video, because they've basically cut out anything that's replicated as a result of that. They've cut so there's only one version of it. It doesn't repeat itself. The editing of that forward version that's been put on YouTube by Emotional Gems is stunning, because they've cut around that.
Yeah, and I will say as well, that choice as well of having each scene end with a bit of the previous scene as well helps you keep it all sort of straight in your head as you're watching it.
Yes,
yeah, there's a lot to. There's just a lot to praise in. Basically, this is one of the cleverest scripts because it needs to do so much. And I will say, to Nolan's credit, here, I can't pay him the same compliment for Tenet, unfortunately. He understood that a story this complicated... Sorry, no. A narrative structure this complicated, where most of the movie is going backwards, but there's also some forwards, intercuts, all that jazz. The story itself has to be quite simple. It can't have a lot of complicated ins and outs and twists and turns, because the way you're telling the story will make it complicated for the audience. If you make a complicated story and then tell it in a complicated way, you're going to lose people. And guess what was the most... the number one criticism I've heard when people have talked about Tenet? And I'm not talking about reviewers and people on YouTube. I mean, just human beings I've met in my real life when Tenet has come up. I didn't get it. It was too confusing. I watched the whole movie. I still didn't understand any of what was happening. That comes up so often. And the reason is, it's a complicated story told in the correct order. Doing it the way Tenet does it, which is sort of going back and then going forward, sort of. It's hard to explain without spoiling it, and I've already blown Interstellar for everyone, so I'll avoid blowing Tenet. And I reckon a couple of viewings of Tenet and you'd be there, but like, no movie should need you to watch it 2 or 3 times to really follow what the fuck is happening. And it's a weird thing that it's a lesson he understood so clearly when he put together Memento, but seems to have forgotten in subsequent years. Or maybe he just gave the audience too much credit and said, you know what, they'll get it, But he made a lot more allowances for the audience for Memento, and I think as a result, it's a much more accessible film. And that's
yeah, because
go on.
Because in all seriousness, things like my example of, you do the recognition for the sake of it, is like a detail you probably could have missed, but easily. It really is kind of spoon fed in. But the movie works because of it.
Yeah, and I will say as well, one thing about the forward version that you don't get from the backwards version is there are some character moments that, when you have the context of how the character got to where they are, work a lot better. An example of that is So Carrie-Anne Moss's character Natalie has lost someone too, basically, and they have a moment in the middle of the movie where she and him share essentially their stories of loss. And one of the things he notes about her is she's lost someone too. You can kind of trust her. She'll help you, right? She'll help you because she feels pity, because she knows where you're coming from. What you learn at the end of the movie is that the person she lost because of our lead character. He killed him. So when you watch the movie forwards, that scene is fucking incredible. And I will say the acting is a lot better going forward because they're communicating things that the characters should and would know. So it's right. I'm not criticizing the backward version for that not being clear. It's the sort of thing you'd pick up on a second viewing or a forward viewing, if that makes sense. Basically, once you have the information you get at the end. But let me tell you, some of those scenes play really fucking different.
Do you kind of see the moment where, because there are moments where like days and nights go by, and he sleeps at least twice in this, in the film. So do you see sort of the, this is probably where she went away and realised it was Teddy moment?
Oh yeah, it's exactly that. It's like, you get gaps that are in just the right places to help, like, you make sense of everyone's movements. Because that's the thing I was worried wouldn't make sense, was the movements. I was like, is this all going to play out where I understand where every character is going and why? Because it's almost like a running joke in the movie. This Teddy character just keeps popping up out of fucking nowhere. And sometimes you think, is he stalking him? What's the situation? Forwards, it's a lot less weird because with the context of what is the end scene of the final movie, but is the first scene of this movie, Teddy is pursuing him out of panic because Teddy is absolutely worried he's going to get rumbled because he's murdered someone, put on the guy's suit, and taken the guy's car. He's forgotten he's murdered someone and is now running around in the guy's clothes and vehicle, not knowing that essentially he's going to be wanted by drug dealers and the police. Teddy, on the other hand, knows this is what's happened. And when you go back through the movie, almost every scene, Teddy is telling him to hide the car, get out of town. He's constantly doing it. And once you get to the end of the movie, that makes a whole lot more sense. And when you watch it either in reverse or for a second time, it gives new context to all of Teddy's scenes. And it also gives context to how often Teddy pops up. But yeah, so all the movements do make that's one thing I thought might fall apart in that rewatch, but totally functioned. But again, the character context it gives you. There's a really great scene with him and Teddy where he says they're having a conversation. It's a pretty deep conversation, and they're talking about his struggles. You know, he's talking about the guy taking his ability to live his life, and there's just this pause, and Teddy's just like, "You're living." And I think that means a lot more when you either watch it forward or for the second time, because you understand at that point that Teddy has convinced himself that by sending him on these false crusades for his wife's murderer, he's convinced himself it's for Lenny's own good.
Yeah.
So when he says you're living, the context of that is completely different when you know the full story, when you've seen the ending first. Absolutely brilliant.
Again, though, that's what's so... The fact that you pick it up in the forward version, or the second time of watching it, is what's so damn clever about this film. Because it's there in the film. And the fact that you need to, because people say it about all sorts of shit, don't they? Like, the more you watch it, the more details you notice. But it really fucking applies with this film.
I think so too.
I think so. And the fact that all of that is there in the film is why it's so clever and amazing.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, like, for me, I was worried rewatching it forward would expose that it wasn't that clever, that it actually only functions backwards because it relies on disguising things that don't make sense in the confusion of a movie playing backwards. Does that make sense? As a thought, that's what I was kind of worried would happen. That motives wouldn't fit with the information I had and characters' reactions. Because I remember when I watched it forwards yesterday. So I watched it forwards yesterday. No. Yeah, sorry. Forwards meaning I watched it the correct way yesterday, and I watched it rearranged this morning. It's confusing, isn't it? Because watching the movie forwards the traditional way is watching it backwards. So it's, that's a sentence that I struggle with. It's, God, even talking about this movie is confusing and headache-inducing. When I watched it forwards, the scene where Natalie is particularly cruel to him, where she has the outburst at him and says she's going to take advantage of him and it's what he deserves and all that stuff. Even though at the end of the movie you go, okay, well, he killed her boyfriend, she knows that. So, or at least knows he was involved. So it's kind of justified. But when I watch this in reverse, is it going to feel out of nowhere? And it absolutely still works. And a lot of it is on the actors, who, again, whose performances, and I will talk about all the specifics of that in a bit, but my God, this cast are doing a great job selling everything at all times. I don't know if that's Nolan's direction, talking them through the script, because there's not much trivia about people not understanding the script, which is funny because obviously we had a lot of trivia about that for like Beetlejuice, which is not a complicated movie, just tonally a bit strange. But there is one piece of trivia about that, about the original person he wanted to help him shoot the film as his director of photography turned it down because they didn't get the script. Funnily enough, the guy who eventually took it admitted to also not getting the script, but he wanted to do it. He was like, I don't get it, but I'm curious. Like, I want to see what this is. But, so there aren't many stories of the actors claiming they didn't get it. And I wonder, did Nolan take a lot of time walking them through their sequences of events? Or maybe it's just that actors are used to shooting stuff out of sequence. So the idea of a script out of sequence didn't seem that alien to them, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, but also, as we've talked about, it all comes together so beautifully. So I think, there was no Jess who had no context at all, and obviously only didn't watch any. Neither she or I watched any alternative edit. Completely got it from that viewing. So I think, whilst there is some ambiguous stuff and it's so different, especially as well for the time, it's easy to watch this in a modern context and be used to stuff being told out of order. But, when this came out in, 2000, that wasn't a regular thing. This was... It's easy to not appreciate how unique this film was at the time. But, again, it all plays. You get it. You understand what's happened. And you don't have to... you don't have... afterwards in discussing it, one of us would say something and the other one would immediately have the answer.
Well, so I 100% agree with that. But what I think is interesting is the real trick to make a film like this feel genius in the end is, will it hold up to scrutiny, right? When you look back at it or watch it forwards, does it all still fit? And for that to work, the actors have to fully understand motivations that you as the viewer don't understand when you watch it the correct way. And I think what's impressive is I feel like Nolan went to a lot of effort. I don't think I was explaining my point right. I think he went to a lot of effort to make sure that every character, their story tracked correctly, their arc tracked correctly, and that the actors were extremely aware of what it was they were supposed to be communicating, so that when you watch it again or forward, it does all fit and make perfect sense why they behave the way they behave in each scene. They're not doing random shit and getting away with it because you're seeing it in reverse, so you're going, I'm sure there's an explanation for why the character is being like that all of a sudden. Do you know what I mean? Because you could hide it under that, but then the problem with that is it would fall apart under a second viewing. Or a forward viewing. I think there was a lot of... I feel like there was a lot of special care taken with that. Or, maybe just really, really good actors that took the time to understand it, maybe. But I think it's in the script too. I think, that stuff's not... That stuff is on the page, in those moments. So,
definitely.
He did it. And I love how it changes the context of several of the scenes, knowing where it goes. let's talk about the ambiguity element. So there's one element of the story that is definitively not clarified. To the point, and I think this is kind of a genius troll, but also fuck you, Christopher Nolan, for this. I mean, I can't imagine Christopher Nolan doing this these days because he feels a bit too stuffy. But I don't know if you're aware of this, Chris. But the commentary track on the DVD has 4 endings.
What, the commentary track itself has 4 endings?
Correct. The first 3
right.
are him giving different answers to the question, was Lenny's wife diabetic? Did part of the story of Sammy Jenkins merge with his own? Was there no Sammy Jenkins at all, and he invented him to sort of make peace with the parts of his past he can't handle? Or was that another effort to control him from the perspective of the thingy character? What's the character name? The
Teddy,
thank you. The Teddy character. Now, it's obviously a big mystery, and we all know Christopher Nolan loves to leave something open in a movie and let the audience make a decision. The end of Inception is the most famous example of that. You know, he refuses to answer the question of what he thinks it is. He feels very confident that the audience should make that call. He went one step further with this, Chris. So there are 3 initial versions of the commentary track that you can get to. So when it gets to 20 minutes from the end of the movie, he'll either tell you for sure that Teddy's making it all up. He'll either tell you for sure that that's exactly what happened, or he'll either tell you for sure it's a mix of the two, where parts of that are true, like the insulin part is true, but there was still a Barry Jenkins. Just randomly, it'll just pick one of 3 random alternate commentary tracks when you get to the last 20 minutes. There's a 4th one. If you try to skip to the end to get the others, to hear all 3, there's a 4th one that will always play if you skip to it that's completely different from even that. I can't remember what that one says, but what a fucking troll. I respect it, and it's really fun, but fuck you, Christopher Nolan. Because no one's going to listen to a commentary track twice. I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere out there was a person having a conversation with another person about Memento. I listened to the commentary track, and Christopher Nolan definitely confirmed that Teddy was making it all up. No. I listened to the commentary track, and Christopher Nolan definitely said that it was what really happened. Like, I mean, it's genius, but it's very evil. I don't know if you want to...
I think... you see, forget the Nolan of it all. Like, can we give a moment to compliment DVDs? Like, the fact that, like, they managed to program the DVD to do that, to play a different audio track.
Yeah.
If you skip through the movie. That's insane.
Yeah. That's a good point, actually. Yeah.
That must cut to, like, that must be like an Easter egg in that, like, you know, because they used to do those Easter eggs of, like, if you go up, down, left, right, it cuts to, you know, Mark Owen performing with Robbie Williams at Nebworth, for example. It's a real example. Or if you do watch through certain things. So that must be like pressing the skip button 3 times cuts to a different piece of, you know, film that has that overlaid on it. And then if you go back, I don't know, that's, yeah, but good on DVDs is what I'm saying, Dan.
Yeah, well, also for the hiding the forward version in the DVD menus, the American version's very complicated. You've got to solve puzzles, answer questions. It's a whole thing that I think is very clever. I watched a video on it. It's really neat how they did it. The UK one's a lot lazier. You just got to press a button when it gets to a certain image, and then it'll do it. It is still hidden, technically. It's not in the menu, but a lot less effort went into that element in the UK sort of European release. But yeah, on the American DVD, that is very clever. But how do you feel? So my question to you, Chris, is what do you think the answer is? What, in your opinion, in your headcanon, and obviously it's just opinion, he's left it up to the audience to decide, do you think Barry Jenkins either A, did exist, but parts of the story are actually parts of Leonard's story, the insulin element, didn't exist at all, and was is completely, was always Lenny in all ways, or Barry Jenkins did exist completely, and the whole story is true, but Teddy's fucking
Barry
with him.
Jenkins. It's Sammy Jenkins, isn't it? Are you saying Barry or are you saying Sammy? And I'm mishearing you.
I might be saying both, mate. I wouldn't.
Right.
Don't rule either out, because there is a director, isn't there, called Barry Jenkins?
Right. I think Sammy Jenkins.
There's a director called Barry Jenkins, so it's very
Right.
he's he's the director. He's the director of If Beale Street Could Talk and Moonlight. So I'm definitely probably saying Barry Jenkins about 50% of the time.
I think Catherine Jenkins exists, and she's.
I think Barry Jenkins exists.
There you go. Answer riddle solved. I think Sammy Jenkins.
Well, I've seen Moonlight. I've seen If Beale Street Could Talk. I'm pretty sure Barry Jenkins exists.
I think Sammy Jenkins was partially real, and versions of the story have blended together. I think the flash of Lenny in the chair implies to me that the insulin of it all, the diabetic wife of it all, is Lenny. And to cope, Lenny has repeated the Sammy story. That's why he tells it to everyone. He has done what the real Sammy Jenkins couldn't do, and he has repeated something enough to have that repetition bury within him, and that false history reality is that all of that side of stuff is all Sammy Jenkins, when actually only sort of part of the Sammy Jenkins stuff was Sammy Jenkins, and a lot of it, such as ending up in the institute because of the wife, and the wife injecting insulin, is actually Lenny after she survived the assault.
Right. So
what do you think?
Well, I'll be honest with you, Chris. I came to two conclusions after each viewing because of the way that the information comes to you. That's what surprised me. After watching it yesterday, when I watched it theatrically, in the way it was designed backwards, I came to the conclusion Lenny was full of shit. Basically,
right.
I was like, it's absolute fiction. Doesn't make sense. Also, the clip they show of him injecting her with insulin, the circumstances is he's doing it sort of playfully while she's not looking. It's not the circumstance described in the Sammy Jenkins story, which is obviously her tearily just repeatedly asking him to do it just to see if he'd do it and to prove, to catch him out that he'd eventually acknowledge he can't do it anymore. He can't keep pretending if he's essentially killing his wife. That story is so tragic, by the way. For those who don't remember, the story he tells of this guy where he basically, for the insurance company, determines that he's not faking, but he's also not physical, it's psychological. But that sends his wife into a spiral of doubt that he could be a con man, a faker, which is exactly what Teddy describes him as later. And I don't think he was...
It's an incredible idea.
What's that, sorry?
Just it's an incredible idea.
It's incredible. One of the ways she tries to catch him out is she starves him and hides and places food in places he's seen around the house to see if he'll remember where those foods are. But he doesn't. He just goes hungry and can't find them. And the final thing she does is she asks him to give her an insulin shot. And then she asks him again, and he keeps doing it because he's genuinely forgetting. And she's hoping to catch him out and have him say, well, I'm not going to do that. It's going to kill you. But he obviously, because it is a genuine condition, whether physical or mental or not, he genuinely isn't faking in the way it's played out in the story as it's told, which I appreciate. Unreliable narrator, merging of things, all that jazz. But
can I just say, the reason I didn't bump up against the insulin thing is because I didn't view, when they flashed to Lenny injecting his wife, I didn't view that as like the injections when she ended up dying. I viewed that as him remembering another time.
Yeah, from when they were happier, before everything went to shit. Right, gotcha.
Yeah, that's why I didn't bump up against that when in the way that you did.
Right. Well, what's funny is obviously after a whole movie of me repeatedly seeing the picture of Lenny. Not Lenny, sorry. God damn it. What's Teddy? Sorry, it's too many names that end in E. Sammy, Teddy, Lenny. I'm like mixing them all up. So when I spend a whole movie reading, don't believe his lies, don't believe his lies, don't believe his lies, don't believe his lies, and then finally he says a bunch of shite that just doesn't, like, you go, crap, that can't possibly be real. The conclusion I come to when I watched the original version of the movie was that he was lying, he was manipulating, which is what we've known he's been doing all along, and he's just admitted to doing. Watching it forward, I had a very different experience. And actually now feel it is, as you do, a combination of truth and fiction, in that I believe there was a Sammy Jenkins. I think Sammy Jenkins did exist, but the wife story is probably more related to that. The reason that changed is watching it when you start with the scene where Teddy explains everything. He has a sincerity to him and a frustration to him, but also his motives seem honest when he talks about what, and it's partly the acting, by the way. We'll talk about Joe Pantoliano and the rest of the cast in a minute, but the delivery on when he talks about how, I wanted to help you, I was a cop that investigated your thing, I was the only one who thought you were right, and that believed you, another person was there, and I was so sure that when you finally killed him, it would satisfy you. But like the Sammy Jenkins story, the memory thing is real and it's serious. And he thought he'd remember finally satisfying that urge and it would put him to some sort of peace. Yeah. But because of the memory condition, it didn't. And he genuinely, to start with, left him breadcrumbs and trails to keep going, just to give him purpose, to give him a sense. Because keep in mind, the last thing this man remembers, that every time he forgets where he is and what's happening, the last thing he can actually remember is his wife being murdered. It drives everything that he does. And the only way he's going to be satisfied is continuing to feel like he's working towards the goal of getting his killer. So the cop played along. And when Teddy explains that, and that's the first thing you see, for some reason, for me at least, I bought it. Which makes the rest of the movie play out way more tragic, because what immediately happens is he gets into the car after being told all that, reads "Don't believe his lies," and immediately then lays himself a trail of breadcrumbs that he knows will lead to himself murdering Teddy, because he knows he can't just cold-bloodedly murder Teddy. The only person he's capable of physically murdering is the man he thinks is his wife's killer. So
which is why he phrases which is why he deliberately writes on the note, clue, or whatever it is.
Right.
Tattoo fact, because it's like he wants his future self to believe, right,
he
when
has
you
established
wrote this,
that.
It was fact, it was established, And
right.
Which again is the actions of a man riddled with guilt and emotion because of the wife and the insulin and all that stuff.
So I do think that the truth lies somewhere in the middle in the end.
Yeah,
it's not how I felt when I watched it originally, but it's interesting how the viewing it in a different order can affect your opinions of characters. And I will say as well, what helped was the diner scene that we talked about earlier, when he's trying to almost convince himself, like, you're living, that sequence, that conversation, which plays so differently in the light of all the information, also really sold me on Teddy's sincerity. I don't think Teddy's a good person, by the way. I want to clarify this. Teddy is still very manipulative, and I do think to a certain point, Teddy took advantage of the situation. Yes, he was, I do think, sincere in that, to start with, he was trying to help Leonard. But I think ultimately,
well, he's a corrupt cop. He's one of the things he's trying to get is the money,
right?
In this, and I assume we never really, does the money just stay in the boot? Like,
yes. Yeah,
amazing.
The money, but then you got to imagine that when Teddy comes to get Leonard the final time, it's the opening scene of the movie, but the final time, if you watch it forward, that one of the reasons he's probably even going along with all this is because he knows that money is still in the boot and that Lenny has actually forgot it's there.
Yeah, although it's a bit odd that Lenny, and that's why Lenny's a kind of a conflicting character, because Lenny's waiting. That's why Teddy's a conflicting character and shady, basically, not outright evil or outright good. Because Teddy's waiting for him in his car when he comes out of carrying out Natalie's house. It's like Teddy. If Teddy just wanted the money, Teddy could get into the boot and take the money, but he chooses to wait in the car to send his friend to send Lenny away from Natalie's house because he knows that Natalie is the the love of the man that he's just killed.
Yeah, so he even says in that scene, it's funny how open it is. He even says in that scene, she's gonna use you to try and kill me. She's gonna put you, like, he literally says she's gonna use you against me.
Which I suppose, again, all sides of shady, what I viewed as, he's not just after the money because he didn't take it, could also be Teddy trying to protect his own ass.
Correct.
Yeah. And again, that's why it's so clever. The fact that, like, very rarely, and in fact, this is probably the first time, if not certainly the most we've done it, very rarely, we're often, reviewing the acting, reviewing the structure. This is the most we've theorized and discussed a film, and that just shows how clever the script is. What do you think to the "I've done it" tattoo that flashes in his memories towards the end? Because I think my interpretation of that is him imagining a fantasy world where instead of all these tattoos with clues and stuff, it says, "I've done it, I've got your murderer." Like, he allows himself a second of imagining that all this hasn't happened, and instead she's stroking the tattoo that represents him killing her killer. Like, it's a fantasy sequence in my head, but
yeah,
I'd imagine some could interpret it as maybe he killed her or something, but I didn't get that reading myself.
I'm sure there are plenty of readings of it. I agree with your assessment, because especially when you watch it the way, I'm sorry to keep going. I feel like I've broken record. I keep saying when I watched it forwards, which I just hate myself for. Sorry, but it's just it basically, that's my way of saying when I rewatched it, because obviously you pick up more details the second viewing. It's just. Yeah, it's some of this stuff isn't actually relevant to seeing it forwards. It's more relevant to just the fact that I watched it a second time. So sorry if I keep saying that. But on that viewing, I was looking out for a couple of different things, and one of them was that scene to see if I could maybe make more sense of it. And that's the conclusion I came to, was that it was sort of like he was, this is a man who, just been told essentially that he's never going to be satisfied. He's never going to be satisfied with killing him because he'll forget he killed him. So for a moment, he imagines what that feeling would be like of succeeding. And in the spot he said he was going to put the name or the information that he'd finally got him, he writes, "I've done it," and he imagines that version of his future briefly. But what I thought was clever as well is I was really, really looking out for the second viewing was the moment where he's face to face with her and the cover comes off. I was looking for signs that she was still alive, like an eye movement or something. Because obviously, if the Teddy version of the story is to be believed, she survived the attack. It was only later that she died because of the insulin thing.
So
I was looking out for that. But yeah, in terms of the tattoo, we both have the same interpretation of that. Like I was convinced it was a sort of an imagine, like him imagining a more like a good outcome for himself, because he's just heard that basically that's never going to happen for him because he'll always be looking, he'll always be stuck doing that.
So Tattoo and Sammy were on the same page about why is it you think? Because I'd have to think for a sec about what my answer would be. Why is it that we think that Sammy is just not completely made up? Why do we think there's a little bit of realism to it?
That's a really good question.
Because I feel that way, but I don't know if I could necessarily eloquently get out of my head why.
Yeah, because actually it's cleaner, isn't it, to just say Sammy never existed. It was always Leonard.
Yeah.
Because what are the odds Leonard would bump into another person with his particular rare breed of amnesia?
Yeah, because in our version, Lenny is also, like I say earlier, doing what Sammy couldn't. So he has learnt something by repetition in the way that Sammy didn't with the blocks.
Yeah,
I guess because then he's got a pre-existing. Maybe it's because it's the most logical way that he could have pre-existing knowledge of the condition. So because if learning about the condition took place after the incident,
acquiring it, he'd not know he had it.
He'd struggle to remember that he had it.
Right. Which they do kind of play a little bit with Sammy, don't they?
Yeah.
Sammy
doesn't know he has,
and that's one of the tragedies of Sammy is he's living blissfully because he has no idea he's forgetting things. He thinks he's living the same afternoon forever, and is probably a little confused as to why he's aging. Yeah, that's probably it. Because also, you know, I have to assuage another thing, which is his investigative skills are reasonably good, especially for a man with this memory issue. So it makes his backstory of being an insurance claim investigator, which basically means he's the guy that if you're claiming for a lot of money because of whatever, he's the guy that then starts showing up and digging through your shit to try and make sure that you're not lying. So it gives him investigative skills which he would have needed to be on the pursuit of that killer. So without Sammy's story being true, at least in some small way, like parts of it, it's hard to explain why he's so good at investigating, and also the thing you said about how he would have to have pre-knowledge of the actual condition.
If Sammy didn't have a wife though, and again I just love picking at it, and it's not even it's just a great film to theorize on and discuss fundamentally, which I love. But if Sammy didn't have a wife, which I think is what Teddy says, who was trying to sue? Who was trying to get that money? His estate, his parents, You have
to refresh my memory exactly on what Teddy says, because it's a lot of information comes at you in that scene. Does Teddy say Sammy didn't have a wife?
I think he does, but I wouldn't be able to check because it's obviously not on Prime. I thought he said that, but I might be wrong.
Okay, well, in that case, my guess...
He might be wrong. I might be misremembering there.
No, but if that is what he says, I mean, I guess the assumption is it's just someone else from the family, daughter, niece, sibling, mother. I don't know. So someone from his family was pursuing the insurance claim.
Yeah.
He wouldn't likely be completely alone.
No. Why do you think Jimmy whispers Sammy as well? Is that him trying to make him remember it so that he knows he wasn't the killer?
Yeah,
no?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I that was one I had less questions about, because I was kind of like, okay, if you know that he's always going on about this Sammy guy, and this Sammy guy is like really important to him, and you're trying to and he's got a memory problem, and he's obviously confused about who you are, you would do anything to try and be like, no, you know me, we're not.
Yeah.
I know about Sammy. I'm not a stranger to you that you've tracked down. You've been manipulated into killing me.
You know who else is a bit of an arsehole? Bert.
Yeah.
But somehow, I do love that Bert gets no comeuppance. I feel like, again, this script doesn't always do the sort of obvious things. Right. And Bert... But I suppose, again, that's sort of an interesting way of like how, in some ways, it is constrained by its structure. Because you can't have Bert get his comeuppance, because where the fuck could you put that in the movie?
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Where does that fit? But I do love that we do get the confirmation, because when he goes, as long as you pay the bills, it's 40, by the way, you do get the sense that he is always asking for $40 from him.
Right. Yeah. And I will say that actor, Mark Boone Jr., I think is his name, would later go on to play a really pivotal character in Sons of Anarchy, one of my maybe favorite shows of all time, and is amazing in it. So I didn't know he'd been in this. Obviously I'd seen this, not remembered that guy's face, and then fall in love with Sons of Anarchy and that actor and that character that he played in that.
He was in Last Man on Earth as well, wasn't he? I think. I'm sure he was
for a bit. I think he had an arc on Last Man on Earth maybe rather than being in it. Or am I remembering that wrong? Yeah, he was in like a handful of episodes. Yeah, he was. But I particularly know him from Sons of Anarchy as Bobby. And obviously when I saw him in this, I wasn't familiar with the actor yet, and then didn't realise it was the same guy until going back basically until yesterday when I sat down to watch this again. I was like, oh, it's that guy. I love that guy. Much younger, but I love that guy.
Is that another thing you discovered when you watched the film forwards, Dan? Jeez.
Oh, this podcast should go forwards and backwards. We should have started with the trivia. Oh my god. We should.
That's what we could have done. As it started, I was like, is Dan going to have done what I couldn't do, which is thought of a way to like echo it? But of course, starting with the trivia.
Starting with the trivia, or starting with Cars Exist would have been the way to go. Or starting with what movie we're watching next week.
What other notes have you got?
I don't have a huge amount of notes on this one. I really this is one I just took in. I didn't actually do a lot of pausing and writing. Because, a lot of the real fine detail is like the best, one of the joys of watching it. And like, I like picking up on that stuff naturally. I do want to just talk about the performances very quickly though. Obviously there's a Matrix connection. 2 actors from the Matrix together. It's not a coincidence, by the way. Carrie-Anne Moss recommended Joe Pantoliano for the role when she got cast because they just worked together on The Matrix and she thought he'd be good for it, and she was correct. It's just astounding because they've got so much to be conveying at all times, because every character is being both duplicitous and giving little hints subconsciously of all what they're actually thinking, and being able to play all of those notes in a way that doesn't give away some of the movie's bigger twists and what the so when you watch the movie the first time, the character's motives, the whole time you're going, who's fucking with him and who's sincere here? And the fact that neither actor gives it away, particularly in terms of Teddy and Natalie, so Joe Pantoliano and Carrie-Anne Moss, neither actor gives it away, but they both lay enough little hints that could do it either way. Is kind of brilliant.
It's amazing performances.
And I'm sure, again, I know it's on the page, it's in the script, but fuck me, do they sell it? It's very good.
It's also like Carrie-Anne Moss also has the turn, like her turn.
Yes.
Where she's just, giving the speech about, right, I'm gonna fuck with you. Like, it's just amazing. Like, she's really great in this.
Yeah, I think this is a better performance than the one she gives in The Matrix.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I know she's most famous for The Matrix. It's probably like one of the most successful films she's ever done. Sure, whatever, and she's great in that. Don't get me wrong. I love her as Trinity, but fucking hell, this performance is so nuanced. She brings so much to the role, and let's not forget Guy Pearce, who, first of all, Jesus Christ, is that man in shape. I'm sorry, you can't watch this movie and not notice what incredible shape Guy Pearce is in.
You can't watch the movie without making this noise.
Woo-hoo! Yeah, I mean that man is like pretty chiseled at this stage. So yeah, there's that. Very impressive. It's weird to objectify him that way, but it is very impressive. But for putting that aside for a second, he is incredible in this too. Because again, it's what Chris was talking about earlier, like those moments where he has this brief flicker of recognition, and for a minute you doubt that the movie makes sense, and you will find out why. Little things like that definitely aren't on the page that he's brought to the role. Incredible. Like, he has a lot to sell in this movie, because you also have to keep believing that he's forgotten what just happened. And that's a hard sell too, because I will say as well, structurally, they don't always... I think there's a lazier version of this movie where every scene starts with him sort of waking up and realizing, oh, where am I? What am I doing? And there are definitely scenes like that in the movie, but obviously sometimes his memories slip away while he's in the middle of doing something. So he has to
Yeah,
sell being in the middle of doing something, but also figuring out where he is and why he's there. And sometimes he even has to sell, okay, I'm confused, but I'm going to I'm going to pretend like I know where I am and what's happening, and act all casual and confident. And you get these glimmers of a very like eloquent, clever character, that the man he used to be, maybe, you know. Like in the scene when Bert admits to him that he's ripping him off, and he's like, well, at least you're being honest about it. And Bert goes, well, you know, you'll forget that I've been honest about it in an hour. And he goes, yeah, well. He has this kind of like, what's the response? It's something like, he's like, you don't have to be that honest, Bert, or something like that. And the way he says it, it's like, it's just, he says it in the way and delivers it with the confidence of a man who is much more aware of his surroundings and life than this character actually is. And it gives you this glimpse of a more confident man he used to be, you know.
You saying that, it's also worth pointing out there's some moments of like real genuine comedy in this film.
Yeah.
Some of it even a little slapstick, like when he knocks down the
door.
wrong door and then he turns the note and it's actually number 9. Like just pure
Yeah.
like the fact that they get away with a moment so tonally different to anything
Yeah.
else in the movie, but it doesn't feel tonally different,
Right.
is astonishing. Like it's so funny. And then a lot of the stuff with Bert is great, and actually, like Teddy's got some real funny lines as well.
Yeah, like it's very well done. And again, Joe Pantoliano, you know, I hope I'm saying that right. Is he has so much to sell. I wonder, God, we haven't even talked about the fact that fucking Tom Lennon is in this movie as the Doctor, and Stephen Tobolowski plays Sammy Jenkins. It's Jenkins. I just googled it. Oh well, we've been saying it wrong the whole time, but who cares? At one point, I called him Barry, so let's not worry about getting these things wrong.
You know, I've just realised out of nowhere, Dan.
Go on.
Out of pure nowhere. You know, when we were talking about teenage pretentious movies, like that kind of like, oh yeah, da 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 da. We talked about like Good Will Hunting. I name-checked Shawshank. We talked about Donnie Darko. We didn't name the granddaddy of them all. Maybe you could debate between this and Donnie Darko, but we didn't name-check like the ultimate example of that, which is Fight Club.
Yeah,
just suddenly thought of that. Sorry.
Well, Fight Club for me is the middle ground. There's a couple of movies, and one of them might very well be my movie for next week, as stepping stones between the blockbuster and the independent, interesting sort of cinema, you know, film for like nerdy cinema fans. Like, there are a few movies that were box office successes and had widespread appeal, but were also kind of like clever in their own way, maybe not as clever as some of these. I suspect when we do get to Fight Club, we're going to find Fight Club is probably actually quite a dumb movie. I have a feeling when we get to Fight Club, it's going to be that. But there are a couple of movies that were like commercial successes that I think lead you down this path. They're gateway movies to more interesting independent films. And that era of pretentious movies for me started with one specifically that we're going to come back to, and it put me on a path of being more interested in films. And it was a big commercial success, but it was also at the time considered to be quite clever and like very cinematically made, and so we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that in a second. But yes, you're right. Fight Club is the one we haven't mentioned, and that is definitely in that range. For sure. I remember watching Fight Club and being like, that's such a great movie. It's so intelligent and full of really interesting ideas, and the dialogue's so smart. Again, I suspect probably not the case. But we'll find out at some point, because that and Donnie Darko and all those movies are probably going to crop up as we go forward. Yeah, so Stephen Tobolowski, who this is his second appearance on this podcast, obviously from his brilliant turn in and he's a comedic actor normally, so the choice to make him play such a tragic character in Sammy is it's really incredible. And obviously, you know, from Groundhog Day, Ned Ryerson, Needle Nose Ned, that, you know, that whole, you know, you want to punch him because he's so annoying. From that character to this absolutely lovable but so lost. The moment in this when he's like, "Have I done something wrong? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Is heartbreaking.
And the moment of like, he loves adverts because they're so short. It's just your heart weeps for him.
Yeah, and part of that is you look at his little happy face while he watches a commercial. Like, oh my god, yeah. Incredible.
And he, you know, whilst we believe it happened to Lenny, he's the actor that's got to sell the wife's death scene, and that scene is so powerful, and it's partly because of his reaction.
Yes.
Yeah. It's and you kind of think even her acting, I don't know the actress's name, but that sort of
Harriet Sampson Harris. I'll hold my hands up. I didn't know that. I happen to have the IMDb in front of me, but she is also excellent in this movie. She is wonderful.
No one thought you'd do it.
Everyone did. But like, I know. But just in case, I don't want anyone to think I'm taking credit for that kind of knowledge of some of these actors. Unfortunately, I wasn't too familiar with her. But yeah, she's great.
She just that desperate. I'm going to test again. I'm going to test again, and then you kind of see as she's dying, her realize that no, this is real. It's so
because that's not in the script. That's again coming completely from a performance. Big shout out to the cast.
Doesn't that add a layer of tragedy if? And this is another reason I think why I like the notion that Sammy Jenkins was real and it's somewhere between the two, because that suggests that Lenny told his wife about the case and told his wife about the conclusion and how he maybe didn't believe it.
Oh, so instead of her pursuing an insurance claim,
the notion is and that's why he's so adamant on, I never said he was faking it, because he's trying to make himself believe that he never said that, because then when it happened to him, his wife was like, well, you were convinced, the best investigator I know, the man I love, you were convinced he was faking it. So now you've witnessed it, you're a con man, you've seen him do it, and now you're trying to do it too.
Gotcha. Yeah.
That's such a complex layer of
100%.
I don't know, juicy storytelling.
Yeah, 100% agreed. And that's the thing about this movie as well, is it's just throwing out great stories left, right, and center, and then just not even it's oh yeah, that's just a small part of this. Like this, you could make a whole movie out of many elements of this movie on their own. I will say as well that actress, Harriet Sampson Harris, will probably show up again on this podcast at least once more, because she was in Addams Family Values. Which is a movie I really enjoyed as a youngster and will at some point probably crop up here as we go forward. Nice. But anyway, should we get to the triv, Chris?
Yeah, let's triv it up!
Triv it up. Okay, so a lot of the trivia, unfortunately, is about casting, because there's, weirdly, not as much trivia about this movie as I was expecting there to be. A lot of, stuff about speculating and stuff, which doesn't count as trivia, and people noticing details they think prove certain things. So a lot of that's been culled out. There's still a fair bit of trivia, though. So for those who don't know, the screenplay was actually based on his brother Jonathan Nolan's story, Memento Mori. However, the screenplay is technically considered an original script rather than an adapted script, because Jonathan Nolan's story wasn't published until after the film came out, which is kind of funny. Apparently, Jonathan had written the short story, and Jonathan was helping Christopher Nolan move to LA, and they had a big long road trip ahead of them, and on the trip, they basically talked this movie through and came up with the whole, based on what Jonathan had written in the short, they figured out what a movie of it would be, and essentially verbally wrote the script for this, almost planned the entire thing out across this long 10-hour car drive or whatever it was.
Do you kind of feel then maybe he deserves more than a based on credit? He deserves a screenplay nod or a story by, not just based on.
I did think that, but yeah. want to judge because obviously I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much who contributed to what, but yeah, that occurred to me too. I feel like Jonathan Nolan certainly deserves more credit here, but he's gone on to do a bunch of stuff of his own, so it's one of those things. But yeah, I do agree with that. For those who don't know, Memento translates to remember in Latin, and it comes from a Latin proverb, which is obviously Memento Mori, which is what the original short story was called, and that actually means remember that you will die. So there you go, and it's a reminder to people that death is inevitable, so live your life while you can. It's a good little proverb.
Dan, try not. It is a good proverb, but try not to say too many things like that, all right, mate? Because you and I are spending our life, at 3:00 on a Saturday, talking into microphones with each other.
Yeah, for
the benefit of 17 people listening to us talk about Memento. So let's try not to think too hard about that.
While we're here, hi, Mum. Yeah, I could be literally watching Bake Off with Nadia and eating Swiss roll right now. That's my evening plan. So.
And even that is like, because hey, that sounds lovely, and we can't decide whether we're going to watch Bake Off this year. We probably will, but like,
yeah, it is a commitment.
Even that is like, I make that joke, and your sincere answer is like, yeah, I know, I could be eating a Swiss roll right now.
No, well, I mean, yeah, okay, look, mate, I appreciate the comedic element of that. What you've done is you've isolated the silly part of it, which is eating Swiss roll, which is immediately ridiculous.
Mate,
but I will add, I will add that, the actual thing I want to be doing is essentially spending time with Nadia.
Mate, there is nothing I have almost, for the benefit of the tape, I've not got married yet, but I have contemplated within my speech at the wedding saying, I'm currently in a room with every single person, literally all the people I love most in the world. And I would still rather be on my sofa with her watching TV.
Oh, that's very sweet.
So I completely agree.
Yeah. So anyway,
I probably won't put that in because I feel like that's pretty offensive to people that have travelled a long way. But it's true.
No, I think but it's 100% true, and it's sweet. I know it's a lovely thing to say. I think that's 100%.
I'm also tempted, but I know that there will be people in the room that won't know the context. But I was also tempted to refer to you as my first wife.
Please do that.
I haven't done that.
Please do that. Anyway, so the medical condition experienced by Leonard in the film is a real condition called anterograde amnesia. Is that what I said at the beginning? Because remember I tried to say it at the beginning?
It's got some of the same letters, but not in the right order, I think.
Okay. I think I got the grade part right. Because it's obviously it's the reverse of retrograde, so it's anterograde amnesia. It's the inability to form new memories after damage to the hippocampus. Now, during the 50s, doctors tried treating some forms of epilepsy by removing parts of the hippocampus, actually resulting in this condition. They actually caused this condition by accident because they were trying to fix epilepsy. And the test they give to Sammy Jenkins in this movie involves electrified objects, and it's actually based on a real-life study they did on patients who suffered this fate. So they try to fix epilepsy, take out a bit of the hippocampus, leads to this anterograde amnesia, and then they electrocute them, testing their ability to remember things through, repeating. They did it with the doctor repeatedly shaking the person's hand with a buzzer, with one of the electric shock buzzers. And eventually, after a few trials, the person in question, in this particular test, stopped doing it, stopped taking the hand. So eventually, showed that while he couldn't remember,
it did. Yeah,
there's a certain amount of conditioning you could do.
Wow.
So yeah. The interesting thing here, that actually the test as shown in the movie is an illustration that Sammy's condition was not identical to a real-life case study, but would not have excluded him from insurance coverage. So that's interesting too. So there you go. So cinematographer Mark Vargo, as I mentioned earlier, actually turned down an interview with Christopher Nolan to sort of potentially be a part of this movie because, quite frankly, he didn't understand the script. He later admitted that this was a mistake, and Wally Pfister, who got the job, had actually worked with Vargo as a camera operator and admitted to Vargo that he hadn't understood the script before taking the role either, which I think is fun. Now, we, take a shot. We're going to talk about casting because there's always some interesting alternate castings. Hard to imagine. Again, we said this a few times, but there's a few of these movies. It's just so hard to imagine them with other people. Blah blah. Rick and Morty, Portal Gun. Which ones would we be more interested in seeing? I don't know. But let's. I'll go through a few of them, and you can. Any thoughts? You can throw them away. So Nolan's very first choice of the role of Leonard was Alec Baldwin. This would have been only it would have been a couple of years after Beetlejuice, so it was somewhere between Beetlejuice and 30 Rock, Alec Baldwin. To give you some context, when that didn't work out, he considered Charlie Sheen and Thomas Jane, and even at one point Brad Pitt expressed interest in playing Leonard, but ultimately
Pitt, out of all of those names, Brad Pitt is the one I would have wanted to see.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, wouldn't it? I do like the idea of Thomas Jane. I feel like Thomas Jane would be an interesting choice, but yeah, I think Brad Pitt's an interesting one too. But then again, would that have been like too many similar films? Obviously, with Fight Club as well being like a film that people do sometimes, like as you said, sort of link these together as like that era is kind of like more pretentious sort of like fan films. Anyway, so unfortunately Brad Pitt couldn't do the role because he had other commitments, and then Nolan after that decided not to consider any other sort of A-list actors because he realized that having a talented but lesser known actor would allow for the film's budget to be more evenly distributed, so that would be more money for cameras and doing extra takes and all that good stuff. There were only other couple of people that he then considered before settling on Guy Pearce, one of which being a lesser known at the time, Aaron Eckhart, who he would eventually work with because he cast him as Harvey Dent Two-Face in The Dark Knight. So Eckhart and Nolan would eventually work together on a different project. So that's nice. Everyone got to work together in the end. After being impressed by Carrie-Anne Moss's performance as Trinity in The Matrix, Jennifer Todd suggested her for the part of Natalie, while Mary McCormack had lobbied for the role. Nolan eventually chose Moss as Natalie, saying, and this is a quote, "She added an enormous amount to the role of Natalie that wasn't on the page." And I think that's very true. Very astute. Smart man, that Nolan. Apparently, she actually only shot her part in 8 days. Which
oh wow!
Which it's funny because I had that in mind because I read through the trivia. I didn't make my full dissection of it and verifying some of the facts until after I'd seen the second. I did my second viewing. So, but between the two viewings, I did read through the trivia, and I kept that in mind when I watched it the second time. And she's actually in the movie a lot less than you think. I think the structure makes her feel like she's this really like regularly occurring character, but she's only in like 4 scenes. In the end, so it actually makes sense that she only shot for 8 days when you
but again, almost story-wise, you kind of imagine her. I do almost wish, and you can't do it, especially when it's so Lenny's story. Mm-hmm. But I would love to see what those scenes look like of her piecing it together and realizing her boyfriend's dead, etc., etc.
Yeah, it's really worth rewatching that way, even if you just rewatch the first half. Because after that, it all starts to become just very inevitable. It's less enjoyable as it goes on, that version. Whereas all that dramatic tension that comes from the not knowing and the putting it all together, obviously, is completely lost. But there's a different satisfaction in watching it that way. But it's it's on YouTube, as we said. You should give it a look. See, just watch the first maybe 20-30 minutes or something. Get some of that out of it. It's good. Definitely for anyone who's interested in the movie, I recommend it in general. Carrie-Anne Moss personally recommended Joe Pantoliano for the role of Teddy, having become good friends with him while they were working on The Matrix. Nolan and his producers had initial reservations because they weren't sure his screen persona, which at that point was kind of often very overtly villainous, as I think demonstrated with The Matrix, to be honest with you, they weren't sure if that was the right match for Teddy. But they met him and decided that because they liked him and he seemed very talented, so they gave him basically a shot at the part. Is what how it's phrased in the trivia. Nolan later praised Pantoliano for having brought the right amount of subtlety to his performance as Teddy, basically essentially saying like that concern we initially had that he'd be too overtly villainous. That's the roles he was getting, but actually, talented actor was able to curb it just the right amount for the role. So yeah, agreed again with Nolan. Stephen Tobolowski stated during his audition that he'd experienced amnesia personally. A few years earlier, he was given an experimental painkiller that had induced amnesia for a surgery he'd undergone. Tobolowski had said that he thinks it helped him get the part because no other actor had had first-hand experience. Nolan doesn't seem to have ever confirmed that's the reason they gave him the role, but that's how Stephen Tobolowski feels about it. So, if anyone gets the opportunity to interview Nolan at any point soon, maybe ask him. I'd be curious if that was true.
Yeah, I'd be very curious about that.
It certainly makes sense, but I'd be interested in hearing it. I'd hope that it was based on his audition and all that stuff, but it would be funny to hear that was a part of it. The narrative jumps, someone counted this, 113 times from one period of time to another. The first scene of the movie is obviously the end of the story, and the story begins in the middle of the movie where Leonard meets Sammy Jenkins, because everything sort of comes together. It's a very confusing list, but 113 times. So apparently during the filming, there was a lot of questions from cast and crew about the scene with Lenny and the prostitute and why it's in the movie and whether it's necessary for the movie. Nolan felt it was a really important scene because he felt it was a moment to set up Lenny manipulating himself, creating a situation for his future self to arrive at. Because when you watch it in reverse, you see that he is... And I don't mean the way when you watch it as theatrically done with everything backwards. Oh, it's so confused. I hate this movie sometimes. I hate talking about this movie because it makes it very difficult. When you watch the movie, you see that scene. Technically, it takes place after him manipulating himself for Teddy, but for an audience, it teaches you he's capable of manipulating himself prior to the ending of the movie where he does the ultimate manipulation and sets himself on the path of killing Teddy. So yeah.
Yep.
So while I do understand why it's probably the sequence that could be cut from the movie, I don't think it adds a lot. It does add that, and I do think that's...
It does, yeah. Which is worthwhile adding.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Apparently, a lot of the dialogue in the Sammy Jenkins sequences was improvised because they weren't initially sure if it was going to be just black and white soundless footage with his narration in the edit, or if they were going to actually use dialogue. So they had the actors say things, but they hadn't written anything because in the script it was the description of the visual and a narration over the top. But they obviously wanted the characters to be speaking realistically, in case anyone could lip read or anything like that. So they gave them the rough, description of what the beats of what the characters should and would be saying in the scene. So all of the dialogue in the Sammy Jenkins stuff is improvised.
Oh wow! And I think it's better. I think it's better not to have narration on that. On that scene,
they mix it. I think there's a few of them where it is just the visual and the narration. But I think that they do it in a couple. They do it with the doctor, and there's a scene later where she comes and is talking to him, and he's like, "I'm sorry, I don't know." And that's the one I think that's most obviously improvised. But again, it's heartbreaking, and they were lucky they had such talented performers because I think that's very powerful the way they did it. And I think they chose the moments to keep it silent and the moments to keep the dialogue in correctly, basically, is my conclusion. Go on.
Can I just interrupt with something not relevant to anything we're talking about, but It's incredible, and if I don't, I'm just going to keep laughing and you're going to think, what's wrong with me? I was just curious what the time was, Dan. So I moved. I shook my mouse. Naturally, my screen's kind of gone into screensaver mode because we've been doing this. Twitter is on my screen. For those people won't know, but at the point Dan and I are discussing it, the UK is going nuts because they reckon there's a petrol shortage. There's a petrol shortage because people think there might be a petrol shortage and are causing one, much like when the shops ran out of toilet roll. But anyway, the funny thing trending at the moment is the fact that the BBC sent a journalist to report on this in Stockport, Dan.
Yes,
the
my
journalist's
hometown.
name, your hometown. The journalist's name reporting on the petrol crisis, Dan? Phil McCann. Phil McCann. That is incredible. Oh, Jesus. Sorry. So I saw that and I just couldn't not laugh. Absolutely amazing.
Phil McCann. And what I love is Twitter likes to write, like, if they work it out, they'll put a little on the trending. They'll put a why it's trending under it.
Yeah.
And I don't know who writes these or whether it's an algorithm. You know, I don't really know where it gets it from. But it reads, yes, you read that right. BBC Breakfast sent a reporter named Phil McCann to cover the fuel shortage. Phil McCann. Very good. Very, very good. I enjoy that.
I'm so sorry, but I think you could agree it was worth.
Definitely.
It
Oh,
was
mate,
worth the
yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way. That was amazing. Great. Right, heading back to the trivia. We've got a handful of pieces left. We'll get in there, I promise. Nearly done. So this is a really interesting one, and I meant to go back and listen to this moment to see if it's noticeable, and I completely forgot, and I didn't even on my second viewing pay attention for it, and I was so engrossed in the movie. That's the problem. It's a really engrossing film. It's really hard to be looking out for some of this stuff. During Teddy's in the opening scene, his line, "You don't have a clue, you freak." He delivered that on the day, and when they got into the edit, director Christopher Nolan felt that he didn't quite nail the "you freak" part, like the aggression of it, like the frustration in it. You know, something about it in the way it was delivered on the day didn't quite sit right with Christopher Nolan. But he no longer had access to Joe Pantoliano. I assume working on the project. Doesn't say that here, but you know, actors are busy. So what he did was recorded himself doing those two words in a sort of impression of Joe Pantoliano. Mm-hmm. So the words "you freak" in the movie, and at the end of that sentence, are not being said by Pantoliano, but are being said by Nolan impersonating him. My favourite part of this is that Pantoliano was unaware of this dubbing for at least a year after the movie came out. Which means at some point he saw the movie and just didn't notice. And again, that speaks to what I was just saying about how engrossed you can get in these films, I think. Yeah, and then he found out.
And also how little you can remember what you did, like, after the fact or whatever.
Yeah. When you film something like this, yeah, for sure. God, I remember sitting down to edit Writing Space and being like, is that how I delivered that line? Really? That was the choice I made on that day? All right. All right, pass.
At the end of the take, you can hear at the end of the take, you can hear me go, "You want to do that again?" And you're like, "No." I'm like, "All right."
yeah. There's the seams between the scenes. You're just like, "You sure? That's how you want to deliver it?" Not a trained actor. Very obvious. Anyway, so they originally wanted the closing credits to be "Paranoid Android" by Radiohead, but once again, Christopher Nolan decided that the amount of money that would be needed to acquire the rights to that song, which was owned by Capitol Records at the time, would eat into the rest of the film's budget. And while he did like that song for the film, he thought the money would be better spent elsewhere. He was very budget conscious on this movie, which obviously, you know, at the time it was a low budget movie. They made it for like $9 million, I think. I looked up earlier, which is not a lot of money. Yeah, it was made for $9 million, and it made 40.
Oh, nice.
So it's definitely a profitable film, and that's not including its, you know, success in later years as a you know, on DVD and such. So yeah, it's clearly and the studio for a bit of money, but yeah, obviously while these days it's just like, oh, should we CGI an airplane crashing into an airport? Nah, I'm going to build an airport and an airplane. I'm going to crash it into it and film it. Wouldn't that cost a lot of money? Yeah, it would, but that's
fine. Now he's just, fuck it, spend the money.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Yeah, that was why he didn't use Paranoid Android. Would have been a good choice, but I don't think it would have been like iconic, like, you know, using Where Is My Mind at the end of Fight Club or anything. So I don't think the movie misses out. No. We've talked about the commentaries. That's one of my pieces of trivia. We'll skip over that. So my world famous segment, Chris. It's time for Cars Exist.
Brum, brum. Cars exist.
Cars exist. Cars exist. Hello and welcome to Cars Exist. This week, there are many cars in this movie. I'm not going to list them all. I found a website that if you type in the name of the movie, it brings up every car that appears in the movie, and it's fucking absurd because it's every background car. It's such an absurdly long list. And I was like, no one.
Can I just say, on that, the Jaguar gets name checked in the movie,
right?
And when it got name checked, in my head, I went, that's coming up on Cars Exist.
Yeah, well, it's about the only car that plays relevance in the movie. Obviously, there are multiple cars in this movie, from Teddy's car to Leonard's original car that he has before he switches to the Jag. But the Jag is story essential. It's a Jaguar XK8, and it is a very nice car. It's a very nice car indeed. Probably was very expensive at the time too. It's probably expensive now, I imagine, because they don't make them anymore. So yeah, probably
it's gotta be.
Earn you a pretty penny. The second and final piece of Cars Exist trivia, Chris, is there is another car that's in the background, parked next to Leonard's Jaguar when he's at the motel. Is notable for being Christopher Nolan's personal car. It's a white Honda Civic, and it's actually the car Christopher Nolan had at the time.
Well, there you go.
So yeah, final little thing, Chris. Slight subsection to that. Cameras exist. Blah, 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 blah.
Bow, bow, bow. Click, click, click.
Click, click, click. Oh, that tickled me. Fucking hell. Click, click, click.
I'm still...
Oh, it's a Polaroid. Shake it a bit. By the way, how differently would this movie have played if it was in the modern day and he could just film everything on his phone?
Oh yeah, nowhere near as good.
Different movie. So the camera that Leonard operates is a Polaroid 690, a very specific model. Of course, now discontinued. Polaroid film has been brought back recently by another company because it was discontinued as well. So if you can still get Polaroids these days, but you have to buy film from a third party who obtained the rights to make it. But yeah, that particular model was a 690. If anyone's interested, so there you go. Cameras exist. Click, click, click.
What you do in a modern context is probably you'd probably be tweeting it, because then you'd be able to do the image and add the description.
Yes.
So you'd just be a picture of Teddy. Someone's got to set that up. The Memento Twitter account. Just basically the pictures of Teddy. Like, don't believe. Stop tweeting me. Teddy comments, take this down, man. I'm telling you the truth. You're going to get me in trouble with work. Natalie's retweeted it.
Teddy, stop being a dick, man.
But like,
Natalie's not even retweeting it. She's just posting memes. She's posting the Simpsons meme where Homer's at the desk and everyone's looking at the back and they're all going, be careful everyone, he's about to do something stupid. But she's pasted Leonard's head over Homer and the people in the background are her, Teddy, Dodd, and the other guy.
And the only one following the account is Bert. He's just liking all the posts.
And he's just written under it, lol. I love the modern version of this movie. We need to get in touch with. Can someone put us in touch with Christopher Nolan so we can pitch this? I want to make this version of the movie.
Except the This is such. I don't know if this is an offensive joke or not. I don't know.
That's not a great way to start.
the flaw in the plan is Lenny keeps logging himself out, and he can never see the photos because he can't remember his login or his username to get back onto his profile.
And that's like the crux of the whole movie, is the information he needs is somewhere on Instagram and he can't log in.
He looks down and he's got tattooed on his hand at Lenny 334449.
and then the other characters make their accounts private, so he has to be able to log in to be able to do it.
So what we're saying is a remake wouldn't be a good idea.
Yeah. Agreed. Oh, right.
In all seriousness, the technology, I think, I don't want, because that would be a huge question if you were trying to remake this movie.
Oh, 100%. How do you get around? You either have to set it in the past, or you've basically got to lean into it and make it a part of the story somehow. But I don't know how you would do that without it being shit.
Yeah.
So yeah,
nice. Right, the big question, Dan. The big question on everyone's lips, including these lips. Where are we going next?
So, Chris, I've already given a hint in this, which is that for me there was a sliding scale. You know, as I watched more films, as I grew older, I got more interested in, you know, what people would consider proper films, not your crowd pleasy blockbusters or your family films or kids films or whatever. And I think the start of that journey for me, the first time I watched a film, 12-year-old Dan, by my count, watched a film and went, "Wow, that was genius. That was clever. Like, that was so smart in many ways." And it made me think films could be more than just light entertainment, and might be able to do things, that I thought were really like sort of, I realized the power of storytelling to be clever in ways that I didn't previously expect it, and it set me on a path of starting to watch more films like it. I was only 12, and it took years for it to, I think, pay off. I mean, Memento came out 2001. I would have been 14. I don't think I will have seen that until I was 16, 17, right? So, you know, this movie I saw roughly when it came out in sort of 99, when I was about 12. And, without it, I don't go down that path, I don't think. This is an absolutely massive part of my love of film, my love of analysing film. It's the first time I went deep on a film as well, because it was like, I was trying to find out more about it. I eventually acquired a DVD copy when that came around a little bit later, because I wanted to hear the commentary track and watch the documentaries on the DVD. Like, genuinely, like, became quite obsessed with it. Do you have a guess at this stage with all that information in mind?
No, because for me, the logical follow-up to Memento is, Adam Sandler's 50 First Dates. So no, I've got no idea.
So, another weird sequence of events where I've sort of almost responded to your choice with mine, just because I've got so many films I could choose from. I could pick randomly, or I could just see what I want to watch right now. And because we've been talking about this, and it's got me interested in it, fuck it. We are going to be watching M. Night Shyamalan's The Sixth Sense.
Oh, nice.
Which, again, I suspect, and I think I hinted at this earlier, I'm not sure this will hold up as a clever thing, but maybe it does. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. But it was a big part of my movie diet, and definitely set me on a path.
It's going to be very interesting for me, because obviously I know the twist. Right. I've never seen it.
You've never seen The Sixth Sense?
No. Because I know the twist. So I think there's a whole load of people like me that would want to watch it, would enjoy it, but just kind of every time, I guess, it's, been on Netflix or Prime or whatever, has gone, well, I know where that goes.
Interesting. Yeah, that must exist.
I think it's going to be...
It's a little tease for next week. When I first saw it, my nana had already spoiled the ending for me.
Right, so you watched it in the same position.
Yes, but the movie sucked me in, and I completely forgot about it until the reveal. But that was before it was like a cultural thing everyone knows and will be constant. She said it in passing, which allowed me to sort of get sucked into the film, forget that was the outcome, and then be re-surprised by it.
I had that by the big episode of Scrubs where
right. Yes.
The brother is
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that sometimes happens where someone will spoil an ending for something, and the thing will be so effective at diverting you away from the answer that when you when you sit down and watch it, you sort of get sucked in and forget that you knew it, and then when they reveal it, not only do you have the oh, that's the answer, you go, oh, and I fucking knew that too, which is exactly what happened.
Yeah, and you're like, how did I not? Yeah, because you feel doubly stupid for not seeing it, and also stupid for knowing it and not seeing it. When you say, and spoilers for The Sixth Sense here, when you say your gran told you in passing, I like the idea of you putting on the film, credits rolling, and your nan just walking past, putting down a cup of tea and being like, Bruce Willis is a ghost, and just like leaving.
No, so she was trying to so I wanted to rent. So my I think I've said this before. My nan worked at a video store.
Yeah, you have.
And so I got to rent videos a lot from the video store through her, and often she got preview copies because they would send a video version out not long after it had been in the cinema, like weeks, when saying this is going to be able to be rented in this many months. Place your orders now, because they wanted to know ahead of time for production, right? Because a big film, video stores would have to order not hundreds of copies, but like dozens of copies, because obviously you don't want someone to show up, want the new film, be like, can I get a copy of Jurassic Park to rent? And they're like, oh, we don't have any, so it was a very inefficient business actually, because you'd have to order dozens of copies of movies, and then the demand would immediately drop out the bottom of it after a few weeks. And then you'd have all these copies of Jurassic Park sitting up. But anyway, different issue. Yeah. So they sent her a really early copy of The Sixth Sense, which had a watermark on it, and do not replicate, do not show anyone this. But she was trying to explain it to my mum with me present, because I don't know what about the cover, or maybe it was just that I liked Bruce Willis because at that point I'd already seen Die Hard. I can't remember what intrigued me about it, but I was like, I want to watch that. It must have been the Die Hard thing, thinking of the timing. So I was like, I want to watch that, and my mum was like, what is this? This doesn't look like a film for children, is it scary? So my nan, who had already seen it from the preview copy, explained it in front of me and gave away the ending. And I just was like, oh, that sounds good, and then completely forgot when I actually sat down to watch it. It was joyous, really good time. And then the DVD was one of the first DVDs when DVDs started coming into her video shop. Maybe a year later, one of the first things they got was like a re-release, I think, of like The Sixth Sense. It's also how I saw The Matrix the first time as well. It was via a DVD, and the Blair Witch Project, I think, when they started doing DVD. And I started getting obsessed with getting the DVD copy, not because I preferred the quality, but I liked the extras. And it's the reason I dug out the Sixth Sense one, because I wanted the extras. I wanted to hear the director talk about the movie and stuff like that. So yeah, it got me a bit into films in a big way. And I've just realised we've done that thing we sometimes do, where we get into next week's film too much, and we're going to have to repeat ourselves next week for the poor people who have just tuned in for that one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, we'll wrap then. You wanna say where the peeps can find us, Dan?
Yeah, you can get us on Twitter at Nothing But Static without the G. But I'll be honest with you, we don't check that very often anymore. So your best bet is at Dan Doolan or at C Billingham to message either of us. You can email us at mail@nothingbutstatic. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/nothingbutstaticuk. You can like and subscribe and add comments there if you'd like. You can review the podcast. We've been saying, rather than reviewing the podcast sort of like by saying, I like this podcast, I enjoy the discourse on the films or whatever. That's not interesting. What we've been asking people to do is basically talk about your Rewind reviews. What films from your childhood do you think will hold up? Are you not sure will hold up, or you've watched recently and found out absolutely don't hold up at all? What movies would you choose if you were doing this podcast? What sort of stands out to you from your youth? Let us know. Put it in there. Don't review the podcast. I mean, 5 stars, obviously, but use the review for that.
Oh yeah,
and,
yeah.
at some point we'll dig through them and read a few out on the podcast. I don't know when, because obviously there's a big delay on these going out, and I don't know if these will be going out telling you guys to do that before we finish recording this series. But if not, we'll do it in the next series.
We deserve at least 4 stars for either reminding you of or informing you about Phil McCann.
Yeah. You either remember that from when it happened, 2 months ago, or you've just discovered about Phil McCann and found that amusing. So you've either gotten a laugh out of it or thingy. So there you go. I'm trying to think, is there anything else I need to... Oh, yeah, the Patreon. You can get episodes a week early, so if you want to hear us talk about The Sixth Sense right now, let's say you love Bruce Willis. Let's say you love the Bruno and his musical career from before he was a famous actor. Oh, and you just love seeing him do some light jazz numbers. You want to check out The Sixth Sense review? You can't wait to hear me talking about the Bruno. You go over to Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You can listen to The Sixth Sense one now. Unless you're already on the Patreon. In which case, the episodes are obviously, you're already listening to it early, therefore you can't get the next one early. But if you haven't joined us on the Patreon yet, and you also get access to the Discord. You can also ask us questions that we sometimes answer on the Analyzing Avatar podcast and places like that. It's a good thing to do. Help support us. Obviously, the free way to support us is by liking and subscribing and reviewing and ways like that. But if you'd like to do it more actively, you can do it that way. Of course, the other way to support us is just to continue doing what you're doing, which is listen to the podcast. We appreciate that too.
Which we love you for.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
So that's everything.
So we will be back next week for The Sixth Sense. Thank you as always for listening. Mm-hmm. I've been Chris Billingham.
I've been Dan Dillon.
And this review has been Rewound.
Fucking nailed it.
Boom. Boom.
Phil McCann.
Phil McCann.
It's too good. It's too good.
Bye.